Have you ever wondered what happens to your mind when you sleep? Or, more intriguingly, what could happen if you stopped sleeping entirely? Sleep, that mysterious state where we spend about a third of our lives, is one of the most enigmatic aspects of human existence. It's a time when our bodies rest, our cells regenerate, and our minds wander through the realms of dreams. But what if we could eliminate the need for sleep? What would happen to our minds then? This brings us to a dark chapter in the annals of scientific history, a tale that takes us back to the mid-20th century, to the heartland of the Soviet Union. The Russian sleep experiment, as it's now known, was a controversial study that sought to answer these very questions. 5 men were chosen as test subjects, their lives becoming a living laboratory as they were deprived of sleep for an extended period. The instrument of their sleepless ordeal? A special stimulant gas designed to keep them awake. And awake they stayed, for 15 consecutive days. This experiment, however, was not just about pushing the boundaries of human endurance. It was about delving into the depths of the human mind to see what happens when one of its most basic needs is taken away. In the course of the experiment, the subjects underwent dramatic changes, both physically and psychologically. They were kept awake, yes, but at what cost? Their bodies began to break down, their minds started to unravel, and they descended into a state of madness that's hard to comprehend. And yet, the experiment continued, for science often treads a thin line between curiosity and cruelty. It was a journey into the unknown, a journey that would take a horrifying turn as the subjects were plunged into a world where sleep was no longer a necessity. Now imagine a world where sleep is no longer a necessity. That's the world these test subjects were thrust into. As the doors closed, 5 men were about to embark on a journey into the unknown depths of the human mind. The experiment had begun. A room stark and sterile was their new home. A few amenities were provided, cots for sleeping, a toilet, books to pass the time, enough food to last a month. The only catch? No sleep. Not a wink. The room was filled with an experimental gas, claimed to prevent sleep entirely. Their mission? To stay awake for 30 days straight. The subjects were a motley group of men, supposedly political prisoners during the height of the Cold War. They were promised freedom if they completed the experiment. The optimism in their eyes was almost palpable. They laughed, joked, played cards. The first few days were, in many ways, uneventful. They ate, they read, they conversed. They were awake, alert, seemingly unaffected by the sleep-preventing gas. As the days turned into a week, the tone began to change. They became less jovial, more introspective. They would often sit in silence, lost in thought. Yet they were still within the realm of normal behavior. The scientists monitoring them noted these changes but were not overly concerned. This was, after all, an experiment on sleep deprivation. Some changes in behavior were to be expected. The subjects remained optimistic, perhaps fueled by the promise of freedom. They followed the rules. They reported their feelings and thoughts as asked. They were, for the most part, cooperative. They were still human, still themselves. At times, they would even forget about the gas, about the experiment, about the sleep they were not getting. They would laugh, they would argue, they would live. But as the second week dawned, the optimism began to wane. The laughter became less frequent. The conversations became less engaging. They were still awake, still alert. But something had changed. The experiment was taking its toll. The men were not the same as they were when they first entered the room, and yet they had no idea what lay ahead. Little did they know, the worst was yet to come. As days turned into nights and nights into days, sleep became a stranger to these once ordinary men. The passage of time seemed to warp and twist as the subjects found themselves adrift in a world where sleep was no longer a refuge. The first signs of psychological distress began to surface. Whispers in the stillness of the night, shadows that danced in the corners of their eyes. These were the harbingers of a creeping madness that would soon consume them. Like a symphony of chaos, their minds started playing a torturous tune. Hallucinations, once mere figments of imagination, began to take on a terrifying reality. The walls seemed to close in, and the very air they breathed became thick with unseen terrors. Paranoia set in, a constant companion in their waking nightmare, whispering doubts and fears into their ears. Their behavior too began to change. Gone were the calm, rational men who had volunteered for this experiment. In their place were beings driven to the brink. It was when the silence fell that the true horrors of the experiment were revealed. On the 15th day, an eerie quietude draped itself over the room. The once frenzied sounds of delirium and manic laughter had been replaced by a bone-chilling silence. This unexpected tranquility was far from comforting. It was a silence that screamed. A silence that signaled something had gone terribly wrong. The researchers, with bated breath, decided to check in on the subjects. A scene of indescribable horror awaited them. The room, originally stark and sterile, was now a grotesque tableau of human despair and madness. The walls were smeared with a horrific mix of blood and filth, the air was thick with the stench of decay, and the subjects were beyond recognition. The men had turned on themselves, their bodies a canvas of self-inflicted mutility. It was as if they were trying to claw out something from within, something unseen and unimaginable. Their eyes were vacant, yet held an unsettling intensity, a look of sheer insanity. One subject was found dead, his life forcefully ripped away by his own hands. But it was not the physical horror that was most disturbing. It was the madness in their eyes, the broken remnants of their sanity. They had been reduced to mere husks of their former selves, their humanity seemingly drained away. Their laughter had turned into screams, their whispers into shrieks of terror. It was a sight that would haunt the researchers for the rest of their lives. As they looked upon the gruesome spectacle, they realized the horrific truth. They had not been studying the effects of sleep deprivation. They had been peering into the abyss of the human mind, and what they saw staring back was a nightmare of their own making. What started as a scientific endeavor had spiraled into a journey into the darkest corners of human psyche. The experiment had spiraled into a nightmare that no one could have anticipated. In the aftermath of the unimaginable, the world was left with more questions than answers. The Russian sleep experiment, a saga of horror and tragedy, had concluded. Yet the echoes of its chilling reverberations continued to haunt the minds of those who dared delve into its dark depths. The aftermath of the experiment was nothing short of catastrophic. The test subjects, once ordinary men, were now unrecognizable, lost in the monstrous transformations they had undergone. Stripped of their humanity, they were now mere shells of their former selves, their minds twisted by the horrors of prolonged sleep deprivation. The fate that befell them was a stark reminder of the potential for darkness that lurks within us all. In the face of such a tragedy, the world was left to grapple with the ethical implications of the experiment. The controversy surrounding it was immense, and rightfully so. After all, the experiment had pushed the boundaries of human endurance, crossed the line of ethical research, and ventured into realms of scientific exploration that many viewed as inhumane. The world demanded answers, but the grim reality was that there were none that could justify the horrors that had unfolded. In the end, the experiment offered a chilling glimpse into the effects of prolonged sleep deprivation on the human mind. It showed the world that sleep, so often taken for granted, is a fundamental pillar of our sanity and well-being. Deprive a man of sleep, and you strip him of his humanity. The conclusions drawn were profound, but they came at a terrible cost. The experiment served as a stark reminder of the limits of human endurance and the dangers of venturing beyond them. It underscored the importance of ethical boundaries in scientific research and the devastating consequences of disregarding them. The Russian sleep experiment remains a chilling reminder of the mysteries of the human mind, showing us just how little we truly understand about the world of sleep. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of the mind, let us not forget the lessons learned from this dark chapter in the annals of scientific history.